Budget suspension face off! eBay Coilovers versus Koni Sports H&R lowering springs.
Budget coilovers, are they any good? Honestly, they weren't as bad as expected. Now on the flip side, you'll also see some reviews where people say they don't like these, they blow out, the ride quality is bad, etc. We're going to try to debunk some of those myths today with a bit of our personal experience with our Mark IV Golf GTI. Alright, you don't need a YouTube video to know that these are going to lower your car and look nice. Any photo is going to show you that. You can get as cheap an eBay coilover as you want and your car is going to look better than stock because it's lower. Based on what I had heard, I expected that the spring rate was going to be really high on these coilovers in an effort to make the car have a sportier feel. But what we found in our Mark IV at least was that the spring rate was actually very reasonable. The car was not unduly abrupt on bumps. It was really the dampers are kind of weaker. So the car was a bit wobbly, but the springs were firm enough to keep the car stable, but not so firm that your teeth are really falling out. I think some of the jokes about, oh, the ride quality is so terrible are exaggerated, or they're on a set that is maybe beyond its prime. Bottom line, even our $400 coilover set gets it done. At an autocross, it was perfectly fine. We didn't have any issues with the shocks blowing out. They weren't leaking oil anywhere. The car wasn't bottoming out unduly. We even took it to a rallycross and we beat the snot out of the car. I mean, we really beat on it. And I fully expected that we were going to bend a shock shaft or blow out a damper, and none of those things happened. The car totally shrugged it off and was fine, even though we were just hammering the bump stops.
That was terrifying. Yeah, there was a lot of bump stops. There was a lot of bump stops.
My conclusion on cheap coilovers then is if you're really on a budget, you just want to get the car low, and you think that you're going to drive a couple autocrosses but not do a ton of track work, you know what? They're fine. What if your budget isn't limited to $400? What if you're willing to spend up to a G on a suspension upgrade? By and far, the most popular option in this price segment is the BC Racing BR Series coilover system. These have adjustable ride height, and adjustable preload, and adjustable rebound, so they seem like a real big upgrade over something like the Racelands, which don't really have any sort of damping adjustment whatsoever. Furthermore, a lot of the BC setups come with camber plates. Here's the thing, it's cool to say you have adjustable coilovers, but you're paying for some complexity that you're honestly not really going to use much. I think you're better off bang for buck to get a static ride height system like Koni Sports that have a set spring perch just like the stock springs and struts would, and then use a lowering spring. So while factory style dampers with lowering springs won't work for a show car super low stance build, if you're going to drive the car on the street as a daily, if you're going to track or autocross the car, I think it's a much better option. The other nice thing is you don't really have to guess on spring and damper rates. So for the Konis, the rebound has a pretty broad adjustability range that you can set to match either the type of driving you're doing that day, i.e. daily driving on the street or a track day, and then also to match the spring rate that you're using. We got the H&R race springs, which were the lower and stiffer ones. The result after the install was that the ride height was essentially unchanged as to where it had been before, which kind of drives home my point of it doesn't matter if the ride height is adjustable if you're just going to set it to a low height and leave it there anyways. The handling characteristics of the car, however, had drastically changed. I would argue that both the ride quality and the handling were improved. It felt like the springs were a higher spring rate than what the Racelands had. The car had this new feeling of immediacy. You could feel the smaller little bumps and trembles in the road, and the car just felt more responsive. I'll admit that I think the higher spring rate means that for driving on a somewhat smooth road, the coilovers from Racelands were actually probably a little bit more comfortable because they did a better job soaking up the little small bumps. But as soon as there was any sort of turn or aggressive driving, or if you hit a larger bump, say like a transition in a bridge, the dampers of the Koni and H&R setup did a much better job of giving you just like a firm single response that it would then get under control, versus the Racelands where you would get a big impulse at first and then you would have a continued oscillation as the dampers struggle to try to keep the body motion in check. You'll notice that even if we aggressively use the curving, especially like through the S's here at firm, and we're popping the car up on two wheels, it soaks up the landing no problem. There's no rebound after the car comes back on the ground. It just soaks it up and goes. I'll get off my soapbox now. I think if you're budget limited, especially on a car like this where you're looking to keep it under $1,000, you can't go wrong with a good quality damper that's going to last a long time, and it's flexible with adjustable damping that you can set it up for different spring rates. You can set it up for street driving or track driving, and just a good lowering spring that you can set it and forget it. Hopefully this video will help you make an informed decision as to what type of system will best suit your needs. It could be that a cheap budget coilover does exactly what you want and it's plenty good enough ride quality for you, and if so, more power to you. But maybe you can save a few dollars over a coilover system by just getting some good Konis and lowering springs, and you'll be happy with that like we've been.